So I'm going to talk to you about acute idiopathic blind spot enlargement syndrome. It is exactly what it says it is. It's acute, happens right away. It's idiopathic, which means there's no cause. And it's enlargement of your blind spot. So it is an acute idiopathic blind spot enlargement syndrome. And the blind spot, as you know, represents the visual field equivalent of the optic nerve. So the optic nerve has no photoreceptor on it, and so it's an absolute scotoma. It's blind because there's no photoreceptor, because that's where the optic nerve hooks up. And so the most common cause of enlargement of the blind spot is when you have enlargement of the nerve or enlargement of the peripapillary retina. So that's going to be papilledema. When the nerve gets bigger, the blind spot gets bigger. So enlargement of the blind spot is a very common field defect in pseudotumor cerebri, in papilledema from intracranial mass lesions, etc. Or if you have peripapillary atrophy, because the blind spot is bigger, the retina around the nerve is bigger. So these are the most common causes: peripapillary atrophy and papilledema. However, what if you look at the fundus and there's no fundus finding? So that means something's causing this blind spot to be bigger, but you can't see it. And that's where the idiopathic blind spot enlargement comes in. So this is an occult retinopathy, a peripapillary retinopathy, but it's occult because you can't see it. But since the advent of OCT, the optical coherence tomography, we can now see at the micron level what is going on in the peripapillary retina. And then so those patients who I used to call idiopathic, we can now tell that they've actually had a middle or an outer retinopathy, that something happened in that retina and that left a mark. And so OCT has made a lot of these idiopathics into something that we can see structurally at the micron level. But clinically, if you don't have an OCT or it didn't show it yet because it's too early, we're still going to end up calling these idiopathics. If we see the dots in the retina, so here's the retina now. In the retina, we got multiple evanescent white dots. This is called MUDS. Multiple evanescent white dot syndrome. But all the white dot syndromes can produce a big blind spot because it's affecting the peripapillary retina. You just can't see it. But because the dots are evanescent, if you miss the dots, then you end up with this as the diagnosis. So if we see the dots, it's a retina thing called MUDS, multiple evanescent white dot syndrome. The key word is evanescent. And evanescent means it's transient, just like champagne bubbles are evanescent. If you leave a bottle of champagne open, all the bubbles will be gone because the bubbles are evanescent. That is what gives champagne its flavor and its appeal. If you don't see the dots and you just have the big blind spot, make sure there's no papilledema or peripapillary atrophy. And you've got this diagnosis, acute idiopathic blind spot enlargement syndrome. You're going to do OCT to look and see what's wrong with that peripapillary retina. And if you really want to confirm that it's the diagnosis, we can do a multifocal ERG, which will show that peripapillary retina, even if it looks normal, isn't functioning probably. And that's multifocal ERG. An electroretinogram just of the peripapillary retina will show that the blind spot enlargement is from the retina. And so the most common cause of an acute and idiopathic blind spot enlargement is the acute idiopathic blind spot enlargement syndrome.